Hi, my name is Joy Axelson. I've worked with the online SBS since 2010. I'm originally from the US, but I live now in Stockholm, Sweden. And today we're going to be looking at the book of Jonah and the historical background. You know, Jonah is a very fascinating story. It's most famous for the man Jonah being in the belly of a fish for 3 days, and also about his disobedience and running away from God, but then finally going and obeying God. So this is quite a famous story, as most Christian children have heard. So let's read Jonah chapter 1 verse 1 through 2. And it says, "Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah the son of Amittai, saying, Arise and go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me." So here we have a picture of Jonah, and his name is, he's the son of Amittai. And we also see a reference to a Jonah in 2 Kings chapter 14 verse 25, and it says here, "He," talking about Jeroboam II, "restored the borders of Israel from Lebanon as far as the sea of Arbath, according to the word of the Lord of Israel, which he spoke by his servant Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet, who was from Gath-Hepher." And so this puts Jonah in the time of Jeroboam II, and he reigned from around 793 to 753 BC. So what do we know about Nineveh? Why was it so evil? Well, let's look at some historical background to help us understand more. We're going to be looking at Nineveh as the Assyrian capital city, what was happening to Nineveh, to Assyria during this time period, and the cruelty of Assyria. So Nineveh, according to Genesis chapter 10 verse 11, it was built by Nimrod. Jonah describes it as that great city in Jonah chapter 3 verse 2 through 3 and chapter 4 verse 11. Also that it was a 3 days journey with how wide it was in Jonah 3:3. And it had 120,000 people in Jonah chapter 4. The ruins of Nineveh were discovered in 1947, and where excavations were done. Nineveh was located on the Tigris River, which is in northern Iraq. According to the VIP Bible Dictionary, Background Dictionary, during the time of Jonah, the circumference of Nineveh would have been less than 3 miles, or around 5 kilometers. But it has been described that the name of Nineveh can either be for one specific city, or it could be the complex of 4 cities together. It was surrounded anyway by 3 rivers and by mountains on the 4 sides, so it was very fortified. And it was also protected by great walls and castles. Nineveh was an important junction for trade along the Tigris River, and it occupied a central position on a trade route between the Mediterranean Sea and the Indian Ocean. So it united the east and the west. Wealth flowed in from it from all sides, and it became one of the great cities. Now let's look at Assyria during Jonah's time. Jeroboam II was king over Israel, and Adonijah III was king over Syria. And this is bolded on the slide. Assyria was strong at the beginning of its rise up to King Shalmaneser III. But after him, during this time, it was a time of growth and prosperity, but after Shalmaneser III, it started to be a decline. There was internal rebellion. There was a number of campaigns that were not as successful against foreign nations. There was internal conflict, and there were some uprisings even. So during the time of Jonah, it was during the weak period, and this nation wasn't as strong until Tiglath-Pileser III. Now let's look at the cruelty of Assyria. In the British Museum, you can see the carved stonings that come from the walls of the city of Nineveh. And it shows how Assyrians dealt with the nations that they conquered, how they showed pride in their warfare and their cruelty, and they did things that made people so afraid of them. So in the first slide, we see where they're impaling of prisoners, of where, and these pictures are from even before Jonah's time. And so they would take stakes and stick them into the bellies of their enemies and would hang them up so that other cities and people from that city would be so afraid. The next slide, we see where the Assyrian soldiers, they're flaying captives, and what they would do is they would, even while they're alive, they would pull off the skin of the people, and then they would hang them on the city walls. And they would also even cut off their heads. They would even slice them into two. Yeah, it's just, even if they were alive, they would put alive people into the walls of the city and close them up in there and let them suffocate in there. Oh, the Assyrians were just very cruel people. The next slide, we see that they would put hooks in the nose of their captive and would carry them away into captivity, like that. And what the Assyrians would do is they would take people from, like when they came and they captured Israel, they would go and scatter them in different other parts of the Assyrian Empire so that they could not be, there were not so many of them that they could uprise against the Assyrian Empire. So they would scatter people all over there, and then they would take people from other areas into Israel, which you see in Kings that they did that. So let's look a little bit about the Assyrian king that was during the time of Jonah. We don't really know much about him, but there are several key events that happened under his reign. There was famine in the land in 765 AD and 759 AD. There was also a total solar eclipse that happened on June the 15th, 763 BC. And these kind of events would have caused fear and apprehension in the people because they would see these as a bad omens from the gods. So it maybe make the people more open to Jonah's message. It's important to note, though, there's no historical evidence of Jonah in the Assyrian archives findings, and there's no record of there being the whole city repenting. That's the end of this lecture.